In this lesson, I will talk about the present tense, which is a tense that students tend to use too often because I think it's very easy, right, to form it. But there are actually only two situations where you should use the present tense, and I'm going to talk about them right now. So, you should use the present tense to talk about facts and habits. Students usually think that the present tense is for talking about the present, right now, what's happening now. And of course, that makes sense because this is the present, but that's not the correct use of the tense. If you want to talk about the present, you need to use the present continuous tense. But the present tense is for facts and habits. And when I say facts, I mean things that are always true, that don't often change. And when I say habits, I mean activities or routines that you repeat. So here's an example. My friend has 2 daughters. So this is a fact about my friend. It's not going to change anytime soon. It's a truth about her. Here's another fact. They love ice cream. Here I'm referring to the daughters. So this is another fact. The daughters love ice cream. It's not going to change anytime soon. It doesn't mean that right now they are loving ice cream. I don't know what they're doing right now. This is a fact about them, something that is always true. Here's an example of a habit. They eat ice cream every day. Here's another example of a habit. They go to the dentist often. So do you see that adverb there, often, and that phrase every day? If you are using those words in your sentence, then that's a clue that you need to use the present tense because you're talking about a habit. There is another use of the present tense, and that's for storytelling. And when you use the present tense for storytelling, you're telling a story from the past, but it's for entertainment purposes. It's not a formal or academic way of telling a story from the past. It's a more casual, informal way of doing it. So it's fine if you're with some friends to use the present tense to tell a story from the past. But if you need to communicate the order of events clearly, it's important to use the tenses more precisely. But here's an example. So, last Saturday, the girls get into a big fight. Sister 1 goes, "Give me some of your ice cream." Sister 2 says, "No way, that's gross. I'm not letting you lick my ice cream." The next thing you know, they're pulling each other's hair. So this is what's called the historical present. And like I said, it's informal, casual. You're doing it to tell an entertaining story. And people do this often. You'll hear it a lot because people love telling stories. But again, it's not academic and formal, so don't use it to write an essay. If you're talking to your boss and you need to explain what happened at work, you need to use the tenses more precisely, which usually means using the past tense to tell past stories. Here's an example. The girls often get into big fights. For example, last Saturday, Sister 1 asked for some of Sister 2's ice cream. After Sister 2 refused, they started pulling each other's hair. So I did use present tense to talk about a habit. They often get into big fights. But then when I started to talk about what actually happened in the past, I used the past tense. And that's the more academically correct way of telling a story from the past. So making the present tense is very easy. You just use the base form of the verb, except for he, she, or it. And that's the main thing you need to remember about this tense, is that you need to add S when the subject is he, she, or it. So whenever you are conjugating a verb, and that means looking at the different forms of the verb depending on the subject, you need to think about who is doing the action. So first person is I, and first person is singular, right? There's only one me, only one I. So in the present tense, when you have first person singular subject, it's I eat. Easy, right? So base form of the verb, no S, no ing, no ed. Second person is you, and it's also singular, right? There's only one of you. And again, very easy, just the base form of the verb. It's that third person that you need to watch out for. So third person is the grammar term for he, she, or it. So again, that's singular, just one person or thing. And when you have he, she, or it as your subject, then you need to put an S on the end of the verb. And it's surprising how many advanced students I've seen who still forget to put the S on their third person present tense verbs. Then we move into the plural subjects. So plural means more than one. So first person plural is we. So that's me and whoever else I'm with. And when we're talking about that group, it's we. And again, just the base form of the verb. Second person plural means you and whoever else you are with. So that's a group, more than one, right? So that would be you eat, again, base form of the verb, and they is a plural subject, and it means all the people not including yourself. So that would be they eat. So for every verb, this is what's called conjugation, and that's what you need to learn to get your grammar right with verb tenses. You need to know how to change the verb depending on the subject. And if you don't get the right match between the subject and the verb, you have what's called a problem with subject-verb agreement. So this is one of the most common mistakes with grammar. It's when your subject and your verb do not agree. So it's like these two guys fighting with each other, right? The subject is he, and then the verb, if we're using the present tense, should have an S on it, right? So in the third person, the subject needs an S. And if you don't have an S, like he fight with his brother, then it's like the subject and the verb are having an argument. They're not agreeing with each other. If they do agree, then the subject and the verb follow the correct form for that tense. So for the present tense, you need an S on your verb. So in this sentence, he agrees with his brother. The subject and the verb are agreeing. They're getting along. They're matching each other. So, like I said, a lot of mistakes in grammar come from subject-verb agreement problems. And so make sure that when you're learning your tenses, you learn how the verb changes depending on the subject that you're using. There are a few spelling exceptions with the present tense. Don't stress over them too much. In my opinion, the most important thing to remember is to just put that S on the end. If you get a few other letters wrong, no big deal, but that S is really important, and the S needs to be there for the third person in the present tense for all verbs. Every single verb, no exceptions. Okay, but let's look at those spelling exceptions aside from the S. So you need to add ES when the verb ends in O, CH, SH, or SS. So for example, the verb wash ends in SH. So in order to be able to say the word, we need to add ES. Because imagine if we just added an S, it would be washs. It would be really hard to say, right? So we need to add that extra syllable there, washes. Here's some more examples. The bus goes to the school. She teaches English. The cat washes its face. He misses his family. Here's another exception. You need to add IES when the verb ends in a consonant and a Y. So the verb study, you can see we've got the consonant D and then Y. And so when we get to third person, we need to add an IES. He studies, she studies, it studies. And again, it has to do with pronunciation. If we didn't spell it that way, we would pronounce it studis. So this is to make sure we say it correctly. So here are some more examples: marries, tries, hurries, copies. But notice, all of these end in an S. So there might be some variations in what comes before the S, but they all end in S for the third person. So don't worry too much about these spelling exceptions. They'll come with time. Just try to focus on getting that S on the third person. Be and have also have small exceptions. Well, be is not that small. Actually, it's quite different. So we have I am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, you are, they are. So notice we still have that S for third person, but I and you changed quite a bit. Have is the small one. Have, instead of saying haves, you say has without the v. Okay, so again, just please remember that third person has an S on the end. Now I want to talk about action verbs and state verbs in a little bit more detail. We touched on it briefly when we talked about the parts of speech. But this is important for the present tense because we use the present tense to talk about facts. So action verbs are easy to identify because we can see them, like run. We can see that woman is running, or swim, or eat. But state verbs are not as obvious. Often we can't see them. They're verbs like think, feel, be. And so sometimes students don't realize that they actually are verbs. So state verbs have to do with thoughts and opinions. So they're verbs like agree, believe, think, know, guess, imagine, mean, remember, understand. They have to do with feelings and emotions like, dislike, prefer, want, wish, enjoy, need. Senses and perceptions such as be, feel, look, seem, smell, see, hear, taste. And possession and measurement. Have, own, include, weigh. So here's an example. He knows 3 languages. So we can't see him doing that. It's a state verb. But it's a fact about him. And so that's why we're using the present tense. So often when we're using the present tense, it's with state verbs. So here is an example of a mistake that students sometimes make. He is owning a car. We cannot use that verb in the present continuous because it's a fact about him. We need to use the present tense. So it's not an action that he's doing right now. We can't see him owning the car. We can see him driving the car, but we can't see him owning the car. It's a state verb. It's a fact about him, so we should use the present tense. So instead, what should we say? We should say he owns a car. So what would be another state verb that we could use maybe in the second sentence there? He something his car. Try to think of a state verb that you can use in the present tense. What do you think? Maybe you could say he likes his car or loves his car. And then try to think of another state verb for the last sentence there. He something a lot about cars. What do you think is a state verb that you can use there in the present tense? How about he knows a lot about cars? So with all of those verbs, they're state verbs. You can't see them, and they are facts about this guy. So that's why we're using the present tense. And notice, because our subject is he, we have an S at the end of all of those verbs. Okay, so let's summarize what we learned. First of all, we use the present tense for facts and habits. For example, I am a teacher. That's a fact. I take the train to work every day. That's a habit. When the subject is he, she, or it, present tense verbs always end in an S. No matter what other spelling things are going on, that last letter needs to be an S if your subject is third person. And that means he, she, or it. She learns, she studies, she teaches, she is, she has, she does. The present tense of be has 3 forms. So that's a tricky exception there. It's an important one to know because a lot of subject-verb agreement errors happen with the verb be. So if the verb is be, you have I am, you are, she, he, or it is, we are, you are, they are. We can use both action verbs and state verbs in the present tense. However, if you are using an action verb, it needs to be referring to a habit or a fact. She walks to school every day, and she needs the exercise. So walks is an action verb, but we're referring to a habit. And needs, that's a state verb, but it is a fact. Okay. State verbs often refer to facts, so we often use them in the present tense, as in, he has a big family. It would be incorrect to say he is having a big family. So I hope you have a better understanding of when to use the present tense, and please don't forget to use an S when you use the present tense in the third person.